probably in your way? Okay, we're going to have some definitions, some background, look at the ways managers' time is allocated and you're going to make suggestions to me to how to make it more productive, talk about delegating, prioritising, goal setting, analyse the way you work. I'm quite often happy to put 500 Fiji or even Australian dollars on the table and I'll demonstrate that most of you waste half your time. No one's ever taken me up on that because you have to pay me if I demonstrate it, but it means getting your diary for the last few weeks and going through it. But we're going to look at the way we work, etc., and that's linked with time management. So look as though I'm not going to be killed in the rush. Okay, we've got 3 sessions we're talking about. First one on time management, then there's personal development and teams. I see personal development and growth as the link between the two. Do you see it the same way? Anybody got any thoughts? You're allowed to speak. Air goes up across your lungs, across your voice box, and the noise comes out your mouth. Okay. I know it's after 5, but you are allowed to speak. Anybody think differently, or do they see the links, or don't see the links?
It's linked. Time management is basically the team's core function.
Yep.
If that you form a team that time or timeline to whatever you're doing, it's an automated project with no ending.
Yep.
So time management and teams are basically intertwined.
Yep. Yep. And then you've got personal development and growth.
That comes
So,
time.
yep. Okay. Anybody else got any thoughts? Yes?
I see that there's a link over there because in terms of personal development, I feel that it's not time management, it's self-management.
Yep.
So if you manage yourself well, then only you'll be able to manage your time well.
Very true. Some people call it actually, yes, not time and self-management, so that's a very good point, yes. Any additional ones? You got something to say? Yeah.
I feel it is something to do with individual attitude on how they manage their time.
Yeah, true.
And not linked to personal growth.
Not linked to personal growth. That's okay. That's a different view. Yeah, that's good. There's not only one view. There are many different views and so forth. And so don't be, if you have a strong feeling about something, please say so. Okay, we'll keep moving then. Okay, there's a bit of definition. So as our friend over here talked about, is really time management is self-management of time. And self is you. And time obviously is defined there as an occurrence of event one after another. Management is the art of juggling competing imperatives, learning to prioritise, delegate. Time management involves your response to those. Okay, so that's a bit of a definition, and we'll tend to like definitions. Now the 5 types of events there, I'll let you just read them rather than me read them out because you can read faster than I can speak, and also it saves my voice. 5 different types of events there. Anybody got any comments on those? Do they think that covers them all or has a different view? Do you think there's I beg your pardon. There's a bit of a link to your personality type, which we're going to visit later on this evening. So that's a link of the events that you're going to be facing. So how you respond to them is important, and there's a lot of looking at yourself to work out how you respond, and we'll get to that this evening. Okay, so there's the big picture stuff, the biological clock. We've all got a biological clock, which is basically around the 24-hour cycle of night and day, and they have different influences on us. And obviously factors can affect that. If you're under a lot of stress and the wrong neurochemicals are running through your body, that makes sleep hard. If you're not under stress but got things under control, the right neurochemicals running through your body, and basically you feel a lot more happier and relaxed and things a lot easier. And this is a new field called neuroscience, which looks as the way the brain reacts to different activities, and also looks at the different chemicals that run through your body. One of the problems we have being on 24/7 is that the wrong chemicals run around your body, the stress chemicals. And the stress chemicals historically are there when you need them to handle danger, as opposed to just stress. And that's causing a lot of problems in the workplace. People are under stress for too long periods, etc., and the wrong chemicals are going through the body. Exercise is important. Historically, when we lived in caves and on the savannah, etc., we did about 20 kilometres every day in exercise. So we're not built for sitting behind desks with computer screens, etc. So you've got to work out, and sleep's important, linked in with that too. If you don't get enough sleep, after a couple of nights, your thinking ability is like a drunk person. You don't reward a drunk person at work, but do reward people sometimes who work crazy hours. So realise that. So all those things sort of come into your time management in some ways, is getting enough sleep, enough food. The brain is only 2% of the body, but uses 20% of the energy. And so you need to have food to it. The brain is about 80% water, so you've got to make sure you've got adequate water. So all these things are important and linked in with your management of self and your time management. Okay, that's a nice quote from Peter Drucker. He is sort of the guru of the management consultants. So he died, I think, about 10 years ago, but still in his 90s, he's still writing interesting stuff. And there's a bit more of a breakdown of what time management is. Personal productivity. And they talk about monochrome, which is linear tasks, and polychrome, people who multitask, etc. So if you can be, they're the two extremes of some types of people. People who are good at multitasking are good at handling interruptions and creativity. People who are more into monochrome are more doing one thing at a time. What I want to do now, this is a quote here, quite a lengthy quote here, on the allocation of managers, time allocation for managers, mainly from the Western world. This is the time they spend doing different things in their work times, etc. So over half their times are in meetings. They have more time in scheduled meetings rather than unscheduled, yet the unscheduled meetings, the meeting in the corridors, can be the important ones to find out information. They spend up to 30% of time on their desk, or at their desk, 6% of the time on the telephone, half their working time in their own offices, and about a quarter of their time in other people's offices, okay? So what we're going to do is break those sections down and get you to look at how can you make those different activities at work differently. For example, we spend about 50% of our time in meetings. So it's a lot of time in meetings. So how do you think we can have better time allocation around our meetings? If you had the PowerPoint, you'd be able to go a couple of slides ahead and see the answers. Can anyone help there? How can you... Because you as managers, and most of you either are managers now or will be managers, spend a lot of your time in meetings, half your time in meetings. Maybe your brains need a bit of glucose or something, do they? Or a bit of water, I'm not too sure. No? Yes? Correct. That's one important thing. Have an agenda. Put times next to them, so that when you hit the time limit, they give people a choice of saying, okay, either we go on talking about this one topic, which means we'll suffer the other topics. So that's yep, very good point. Yep. Have an agenda and get the agenda out early so people know what's going to be discussed. Don't get it out as they all turn up to the meeting. Yes.
Delegate your subordinates to attend some other meeting.
Good one. Yeah. Don't think you have to go to all meetings. Sometimes somebody else, especially if they're, lower down the organisation, can go to the meeting. Don't feel you should go. And even, why not, if halfway during the meeting you find that you're no longer needed, excuse yourself. Don't you feel you have to stay there? Any other thoughts? Well, I've got a few ideas here which I'm just going to show to you. Okay, have an agenda, which we just talked about. If an issue comes up that's not on the agenda, reschedule it for another meeting. Okay, don't feel you have to discuss it. So, and once people learn that it has to be on the agenda to be discussed, they will then make sure the items come up. Send out reports, briefing papers days before the meeting so people don't have to read them when they get them there. It's not the first time we've seen them when they turn up at the meeting, like the financial reports or background or the monthly reports or whatever is written for the meeting. Make sure they go out at least 2 days before people come, and therefore you assume everyone's read it so you don't waste time people reading. Meeting starts on time. Even if not everyone's there, just start it. Don't feel you have to wait, and then the message will soon get through to other people that you start on time. I found in Solomon's to get people on time to my training sessions, I give them breakfast. And we actually started early. They arrived before. But geez, they were big eaters too. They certainly enjoyed the breakfast. I tried it in Fiji and it didn't work. As with your public servant. And also, make sure only issues that are discussed are ones relevant to that meeting, relevant to all the people in the meeting. If you find that it's only relevant to 2 people, you just stop that discussion and say, okay, you 2 later on catch up and talk about this. Don't feel you have to discuss it, because it's got to be stuff that's relevant to everyone at the meeting to be discussed, not relevant just to say 1 or 2 people. A few more. Any controversial issues, make sure they're the last item on the agenda, because otherwise they'll take the whole meeting. I'm on the committee of a not-for-profit group linked with a rather rare autoimmune disease because my wife suffers from it, and most of the issues I bring up are pretty controversial, and I always insist I am the last agenda. Usually after 3 hours of meetings, everyone wants to go home, so they just say yes, yes, yes to all the items, okay? If I had them up first, I reckon they'll still be arguing about a lot of them and so forth. So any controversial, make sure it's the last item. We'll be looking at a process called the 6 hats a bit later on, which is based on Edward de Bono's way of thinking. A good way to run a meeting is to use that type of concept, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And someone is allocated to keep the process under review. I was asked to be chairman of a meeting of a group, a large financial group in Melbourne. They said, our meetings always run late. Can you come and chair it? And I said, no problems. And I just had one rule. I said to them, I give you a choice. If I think somebody's repeating themselves, I just say, hey, what we call in English, you are spinning wheels. You have a choice. Keep on spinning wheels and move on. Common sense always prevails. Now, the meeting started an hour late because they'd been doing some meeting elsewhere, and they said, how are you going to handle that? And I said, well, I'm from Queensland. We don't have daylight saving, so I've got an hour up my sleeve. But by having that one simple rule, they actually caught up that hour and finished their meeting on time. So you need somebody who's there to be pretty strong on the process, and make sure you agree an action plan. Have the breaks, because your brain needs a break, needs a rest, and also something to eat because it needs energy, etc. So make sure you do those things. So there's some of the they're the ones linked with the agendas. This one's linked with you don't all have to be in the same room. I mean, other people outside of town can do it through Skype, video conferencing. Don't feel you all have to hop in your cars and drive to the meetings. I was involved in organising I was part of a panel international conference to give a presentation at Las Vegas at a Change Management International Symposium, and they wanted to talk about culture and they wanted to talk about change in different cultures. They had an Indian lady who lived in the West Indies. They had an American living in Spain. They had an Italian living in South Africa, and myself in Australia. We did it all on Skype. We only met, first time we met was 24 hours before the meeting. So we had to develop the relationships because we didn't know each other by Skype. Some mornings I was dressed in my pyjamas, another morning somebody else. All done on Skype. And we met, only time we met 24 hours before the conference and went well. And I love the story of the the Carver party that was in Suva and the Carver party that was in Sydney, and they linked up on Skype. So they sort of said all the right things to each other, but Skype as though they're all in the same room. So use technology to your advantage. If some person's in Nandi, don't feel they have to hop in a car and drive here. You can link through to them. Never hold meetings in the morning. Hold meetings first thing in the morning, they'll go all day. You hold them half an hour before end of day, ideally on Friday afternoon. You'll get to the main point very quick, very quick. Also, schedule days for meetings. So you can say, okay, I'm available to meet on issues at 4:30 on Friday afternoon, because quite often they have an issue on Monday and they know they really can't get to you till Friday unless it's a life or death issue. They will solve it before Friday comes themselves, because otherwise it's too easy to run upstairs to the boss and say, hey, we've got this problem. So, yeah. And only, as one was mentioned before, delegate only the appropriate people. If a person lower down the organisation can be just as beneficial that meeting. And have adequate sleep before meetings. Now, sleeping in is not a good way to get adequate sleep. If you are suffering from lack of sleep, go to bed early. And I found it interesting that people are talking about, the pressure you're under. Because of the way your body works and with sleep, if you're tired at night, the best thing you do is go to bed and set your alarm an hour early, when your brain's refreshed, basically. And I learned that because I used to be the old school, I'll finish this, I'll keep on going, and used to drive myself, but your efficiency just goes down. So what I do now is just, okay, I'm tired, set the alarm for an hour early, get up, and it's amazing, you do that work and do it a lot quicker, and your brain's refreshed, and also your brain's been ticking over while you've been asleep, so it's been thinking about the problem, and your efficiency is a lot higher, and also you're not going to be that tired. Turn your mobile phones off. People get pretty sensitive after a while. They'll lose contact with their mobile phones. They'll want a short meeting, so they get outside and turn on their mobile phones and find out what's going on. So there's some of the ideas that you'll find, if you can introduce those, part of time management and running your meetings, will improve the whole efficiency and productivity. Because if you sat down and add up the value of people's time sitting in meetings, it's horrifying. And a lot of them are not productive. So there's some ways. So what I was going to do, as we've got a bit of time, is a few more points. Don't dwell on the past. Too often people talk about the past at the meetings. Okay, learn from it, because you're not going to have much impact on the past, but you have much more impact on what's happening now and the future. And if nothing to discuss in the meeting, reschedule it. Okay, we don't need a meeting this Friday because we've got no issues to raise. We'll have it next Friday. And so forth. So don't feel, because it's always scheduled, that you must have it. No issues to discuss, don't have it. Again, another way of really speeding up meetings is make people stand. After a while, they sort of, is again making them get to the important issues and not just talking for the sake of talking. So there's some ideas of how to make your meetings more productive, linked in with time management. And you as managers are going to go to more and more meetings. And if you can introduce some of those in your own areas, you'll find that the meetings are much more productive and a lot shorter. Because I think it's one of the dreads of a manager. No, got to go to another meeting, Any comments on those thoughts? You got any additional ones? At least a few more people are smiling. That's a nice side. Yes?
Dealing with board members with conflict of interest.
Conflict, yeah.
Hardly deal with that. It's sort of a governance issue, but
Yeah.
the person is not declaring.
Yeah.
Chairing a board meeting and you know that he's pushing his agenda.
Yeah. We've got a mic. Say that again, because I think people might have.
Sorry, this is more of corporate governance, if I may. If there's a sitting board member who's got a conflict of interest, and you as a chair, you know exactly his involvement, his high involvement. What do you do with that situation? Do you continue the meeting, or you?
Well, my immediate thoughts are, and anyone else might like to answer it, is basically that person should leave the room when they're discussing issues that he has a conflict of interest with. and that should be identified to him beforehand or her beforehand, so that they realise that when that comes up, that they should leave. That's my thought. But anyone else got any thoughts? Because that's an important one. I mean, and if you yourself see you've got conflicts of interest, it's really up to you to say, look, I've got to step out here because I've got a conflict of interest. Or this is my weird sense of humour. In one Australian boardroom, that would have meant there was no one left because they all had conflicts of interest. So it's a hard one and so forth. Because, but you know, that's where the ethics come in and you'll stand on sort of on those issues. Any other thoughts?
If it's a conflict of interest and if it's a part of the agenda, I think you should prepare yourself well, go with all the facts and all your bullet points, make sure you will arm well, and do not go into an argument session. But however, it has to focus on the issue or on the situation rather than solution. And if you feel that it's going out of hand, then just stop talking on the topic. I think that's my view.
Okay, any other thoughts? Because you're going to hit these conflicts of interest either yourself or know people who you're dealing with who've got conflict of interest. So it's not an easy one to handle, and especially if they're the bosses. Not an easy one. Any other thoughts? Has anybody hit that already? You're not owning up to it, okay? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is show you, this is a process that for if you want to run meetings, especially meetings that you're looking at challenges you're trying to face, is a process called Edward de Bono's 6 coloured hats, and so on. It's a different way of thinking. And this is why I got problems with the other group. I put them on people's heads, so I just won't put them on the heads this time. Okay, they're different coloured hats. So the advantage of this is that everyone thinks the same way when you're using one of the hats. So if you're using the white hat, which is for information, you say, okay, we want all the information on this topic. So that's the white hat. And it has to be factual information, not your thoughts. And you don't necessarily have to use these hats, because you can actually just think about it. Say, okay, do we have all the information? You don't necessarily have to say white hats. And the next one is the red hat, which is the emotions, which you don't have to justify. You just say, I don't like the idea, my intuition says it's a silly idea, etc. You don't have to be rational about it, okay? And the next one is the green hat, which you say, are there different ways of doing this, what we're talking about? So that's the green hat. Are there different ways of looking at this problem? And then you have the black hat, which is the critical appraisal. What can go wrong? Now, you never have this up first, because if you do, it will dominate the whole meetings. So you want to have it down lowish in the order of things. Now, you don't actually have to follow the order I've gone through. You can change it. And then you have the blue hat, which is bringing it all together. What's the, sort of the summary. Now, hats is a symbolic way of looking at things, but I've used this very successfully in Fiji with different organisations, and they're actually some of them are still using 5 years after being introduced to it, and so forth. But so the key, and your meeting times will fall by 25%. You'll have a much better outcome because you just get focused on one way of looking at it. Because how often you go to a meeting and you know the person's against an idea and he or she will just all the time be negative. No, you're going to be critical when they're looking at the black hat. And you can go back and visit hat, use any sequence you like, and so on. But it's not a bad process for running meetings, especially meetings where you are trying to solve a challenge that's facing the people or an issue. Works in all situations. You can use it in community levels. It's not just a business one, and even in your family setups. So after a while, you don't necessarily think of the hats. You say, do we have all the information? What do people feel about this? Are there alternatives? Anyone's got some thoughts, what can go wrong, etc. So there's a process for you to get more efficient sort of meetings, and then usually have somebody wearing the blue hat to bring it all together. Okay, and I have a bit of a plug. It's in a book I've written and so forth, and I'm going to give like a door prize. I've got a copy of the book here. If I can get later on at the break all your names and email addresses, and we'll put it in a hat, and we'll have a drawer, and somebody can get a copy of the book. But it is available at the book centre as well, and so forth. Some people already got it who've attended the other courses. Okay, so that's a way you can use. Not saying that's the only way, but if you're looking for a way for a process to make your meetings better in sense of productivity and use of time, use those.